Hello and welcome to episode 13. That's right, episode 13 in the TSSI, refuting Marx's inconsistency and the TSSI and the TSSI and the TSSI. We have today a very, very full panel. We've just had Alex hop off into the chat to do some dueling as normal. We have the hardcores left. We have Emmanuel say something.
Bork.
Is Emmanuel wearing a like a shower? What do you call them? A shower robe? Is that? Have you been in the sauna? Have you been in the swimming
sauna? Yes, I am wearing a shower robe.
My God, married life is really kicking off.
Because fuck clothes, right? Who the fuck needs them?
I hear you. Now, secondary only to Emmanuel's debonair self is Derek. Derek, how's it going? He's muted.
Doing pretty good. It's cold here in Utah.
What temperature is it? Celsius.
Probably -8.
In the day, during the day?
Yeah.
God damn it, that's cold. Is there snow?
Yeah, there's snow.
Fantastic.
And I'm in my unheated basement too. So.
Lovely. Let's keep this going as long as we can. There'll be icicles dripping off his face. Lexi, how are you?
Whew, less said about it, the better. But you know what I'm ready for? Is some spurious correlations. That's what I'm ready here for, Tom.
Lexi, where did you get the new icon? Where is this dog coming from?
Oh, this is, I've kind of like spun all the things I've been writing instead of Lexi K. I've been changed it to Alexa Ibo, which I like because you can't say it out loud without bothering a lot of Amazon consumers. And there's something about the spirit of a kind of useless robot dog, small dog, that just resonates with me. I don't know.
What does the Ibo bit mean? What's that?
Well, the Ibo was something that Sony put out towards the end of the 90s, and it was a hope to create a little robot companion dog that could recognize faces and all this ambitious stuff that they definitely didn't have the tech for. I think they recently relaunched it, which kind of hurt the retro appeal of what I was trying to do. But I don't care about the relaunch. I care about the initial like preposterous attempt. It's like it's kind of amazing in a sort of accelerationist, like this is what you want to replace human relationships with kind of way.
I hear you. Well, I'm fully stocked. I got my orange juice, my oranges, and an apple. So nice. Let's see if we can start to share the screen, and then we'll get going. Okay. Today we are starting chapter 11. This is the last full chapter in the book. The chapter 12 is a kind of a roundup. So today this is the last meaty one we have to do. I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a great chapter. What is this about? Well, let's do a little introduction. After all the things went down with the problems of the transformation problem and trying to get it working, Anwar Shaikh and Ochoa, two guys, went off. I think Ochoa's a guy. Anwar Shaikh is. They went off and did some empirical work and trying to actually link prices to values. So this was the idea of trying to show that the amount of labor that's in a product or a commodity is linked to the price. Okay, now all we've been doing so far with this transformation problem has been this idea of actually transforming in prices. So what these guys have kind of gone to do is kind of slightly against the whole Marx's ideas that prices and values transform. So we have, so Marx would have said that price and value, the prices of goods, is not the amount of labor that's in them, because there are rents and all type of things going on in the real world. So prices won't be exactly only the aggregate. So these guys went ahead and did it, and they got some important results saying, look, we've got 7% correlations between prices and values. So the price, Marx was right, even though they're not really saying that's what Marx said. But Andrew's going to attack that and say, no, you got that all wrong. So that's what we're here to go through today. Does anybody have anything else to say before we kick in?
Just that this chapter is really solid and deals with all critiques thus far launched against this chapter. It still holds up, even if you haven't followed the exchange that happens later after the publication of this book.
Okay, so
one thing I'd say about this is it sort of demonstrates the way that there's a turn away from axiology and kind of like trying to make scientific models like a logical proof or like a regular sort of equation, and the turn towards big data and econometrics and statistics. And while I'm a little more shaky, funnily enough, on the stuff where you're treating mathematics like a logical argument, you're treating a model, you're building a model like that. I'm a little shakier on that stuff than I am on stats and that kind of thing. And stats has such tremendous power to undermine arguments and undermine causal claims. It's devastating.
okay, so basically, we're going to get into some statistical arguments here about why the research done by Sheikh and Ochoa and others falls apart. Okay, so let's read this bit. I wish to show in this chapter that the empirical defense is actually quite unsuccessful. I don't know if you just said that. I was busy just trying to get something working here on my computer, but yeah, this chapter is a departure from all the rest of it. In that it's less it's less of a deductive argument and more an empirical argument. Is that what you were saying, Lexi?
Yeah, and I think it reflects a general turn in science, economic science, I would say, which good. Axiology kind of needs to die, even if I have some pet theories that I'd like to see translated.
Only the good axioms should survive.
Yeah, I mean, like if your rational choice model, if your mathematical model can withstand statistical scrutiny, good. Then we might actually be making some headway. But other than that, shrug.
Get the fuck out of here. Move along. Hop on the bike.
Yeah.
Grab your coat.
Yeah.
Get on the bus.
What I liked about this chapter is the charge that Marxism is parallel to praxeology is completely debunked by it, even though that's not what this chapter.
Right.
And at all, actually. But it's and for those of you who don't know what I mean by praxeology, that's the Austrian deducto axiomatic school of economics, where you basically we have this logical deduction. It is true in all cases. Suck it. I don't even have to do the math.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't matter about the empirical data. What matters is my deductions are right.
Right. And to me, this proves that no, the empirical data does matter, and it backs up the deductions. So
yeah.
Right. When you're in a situation like that, you have a strong theory from two sides. And again, I've over and over been throwing out how much I love, doing my little thought puzzles and logic games of creating arguments. I love that shit. And I don't, want to leave it behind unnecessarily. So I'm willing to hang on to as much of it as possible. But really, statistics is a butcher's shop.
Okay. So let's just read this bit. I wish to show in this chapter that the empirical defense is actually quite unsuccessful. The statistical methods employed by its proponents are unsound, and new empirical results compel us to reject its version of the labor theory of value. Even if it were a success in its own terms, it would fail as a defense of Marx's value theory, contrary to what some have claimed. Okay, let's move along. So let's get Marx. So Kleiman, instead of calling what Sheikh and these guys are doing a labor theory of value empirical work, he kind of calls it a labor theory of price. So what he's trying to show here is that they're trying to say that price is predicted by the amount of labor in the product. And what Andrew is saying is Marx doesn't say that. what he actually says is, in the aggregate, that's true, but in the individual commodity, they can be all over the shop, because there can be any number of reasons why the value is the price is away from the value, whether it's, you know, there's a shortage of something, there's a glut of another, there are rents being paid, there is patents, there's all manner of things that go in there and totally skew the prices of commodities. For example, one very key one to think about would be oil. Okay, the amount of labor that's needed to take a barrel of oil out of the ground probably has very little to do with the price of oil. So much of it has to do with how strong are the oil producing countries at maintaining, getting a strong rent from the non-oil producing companies or countries. Okay, there's probably only a very minor correlation between value, between wages and oil price. So that's an example where, you know, this idea of the labor theory of price will fall on its ass. Not that I have any empirical data, but I'm sure that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to take
Feynman
this?
has this Marx quote about the spinner and the pocketing of.
Okay.
Where
is that?
Marx says nobody believes that a cotton spinner who.
We'll get there in a minute. Can we get?
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah, because we're going to get there.
I just thought it was a good example of what you were talking about.
Yeah. Okay. We'll definitely get there. Sorry to cut you off, because we haven't really got into saying here what Sheikh has said yet. Okay.
Right.
Lexi, do you want to read a bit of this? Let's see, because
yeah, sure. Labor theory of price.
Let's read all of this bit here, because I think that all of that is quite important.
All right, I'm gonna get my reading voice out. Pardon me. All right. Me. Scheich at first attempted to solve the, quote, transformation problem by means of an iterative, step-by-step version of the usual simultaneous dual system model. This allowed him to argue that Marx's own procedure was the correct first step, yet, once the process of iteration was completed, Scheich's solution, like the others, failed to preserve two of Marx's three aggregate equalities. Still searching for a way to upload the, quote, labor theory of value, Scheich turned to the data. He suggested that, quote, variations in prices across industries are dominated by variations in values. In other words, industry-level prices do not deviate systematically from values. If one industry's value is X% higher or lower than another's, its price will be approximately X% higher or lower as well. I shall call this the labor theory of price. Scheich and Ochoa statistical results appear to confirm the theory. Subsequent studies using data from various countries in various years seem to confirm it as well. The correlation between prices and values, a measure of the degree to which they vary together, has frequently been found to exceed 0.95, a figure quite close to the maximum value of 1. Moreover, deviations of prices from values have been found to be quite small. The average deviation is sometimes about plus or minus 20%, and often about plus or minus 10% or even less. Scholars who have recently reviewed this literature have been impressed by the, quote, strong evidence and, quote, robust empirical results that have been obtained.
Well, this is funny for me, because I was working in a bank in Ireland in the headquarters, and I was doing some research for them, and we were trying to investigate using some data mining. It's back about 15, 17 or 18 years ago. And I spent a long time trying to figure out how to predict when someone was trying to close or was going to close their bank account. Okay. And like when I see this this statistic of 95 as a correlation, to me that rings an alarm bell straight away, because I created a model that predicted it would close with about 95 or 6% accuracy. And then this is a couple of months of work, and then after a couple of weeks later, I then figured out that actually one of the variables I was including in the model was actually a description. It's something that described that someone had actually closed their account and had been mislabeled. So basically, my model predicted 95% of the time when people already knew that someone had shut the account. So it's like when you actually, I spent like 2 months of my life working on that. The data was mislabeled. So it's like when I see this 96%, 95%, I'm very skeptical straight off the bat.
Well, it's kind of like when someone's trying to tell you how democratic Cuba is, and they mention, yeah, the last election, which came in at 97%. It's like, okay. Like, that's too high. Nothing agrees like that. There's something wrong here.
Or Japan that has a 93% conviction rate.
Yeah. Yeah, is it because they're so good at sniffing out crime? Or...
And a confession rate of 95%, which is scary.
Man, they're just so good at finding the criminals.
Yeah, I love doing OCD stats when I've lived in countries and knowing how those OCD stats are cooked.
OECD or just your fondness for obsessively combing stats?
OECD. Although OCD stats is about yes, I do have a fondness for excessively combing stats.
Me too.
This is
my Zen garden.
Don't know about me in my day job. A lot of what I do is just combing aggregate testing data, like when I'm not teaching, and looking at interventions based off that. So I'm totally used to anything with that high of a correlation being bullshit. So because almost always you find that when you do the deep qualitative studies on those things, you find that that there's a factor that's been missed. So like Tom's experience would totally confirm my past experience with that too. There's been a study that was cited on best practices based off the school in northeastern Georgia that had 100% free and loose lunch and a 94% success rate for the intervention. But then you discovered the reason why I had 100% free and reduced lunch is the nuclear power plant in the area pays for everybody's lunch, not because they're poor. The aggregate demographic of the area is about $50,000 to $60,000. So, so it's a cook stat, but like they were using it to punish like inner city schools in Chicago and Atlanta and stuff. So, you know, and make them do these things. And so that doesn't seem directly relevant at all. But it is a thing. Whenever you see a correlation that high, you really do have to be like, what's the confounding factor? Like,
yeah.
If you meet Buddha on the road, kill him.
Do you want to know a funny story? Is that even after I figured it out and I told my managers that it was essentially a useless model, they still insisted on rolling it out.
Oh my God. Well, but isn't that the thing? Like for Derek's case, I can see why that the motivation is there in that nuclear power plant. That makes sense. There's a straightforward, duplicitous cash value at work with your manager. I can see that. You know what I mean? I can see the straightforward, duplicitous cash value. Now, when we're starting to get into the correlations that we'll be discussing today, yes, there are some academics I could imagine having, you know, like a sort of cash value of these of putting this forward. But you know, not everyone that I talk to about these things that believe strongly, as some of the authors we'll be discussing today do, they don't seem to have that good a motivation, a good in the capitalist sense, good in the instrumental sense, the practical sense. Some people I feel like are taking this stuff on board without doing the requisite statistics, which again, I find it hard to believe, but honestly, I find this entire messy debate hard to believe that we've been going through in the book. So something is deeply wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And like, again, if you have a correlation that high, the risk that you're actually measuring the same thing, that your X variable and your Y variable are just two expressions of the same thing, and you're not actually tracking anything, that should like be your first working hypothesis that, you know, something's really iffy.
You're logic is circular and hidden in math.
Yeah. Let's keep going. Okay, the LTP and Marx's theory. Okay. It has also been thought that the empirical results support Marx. This is clearly incorrect. The LTP's proponents acknowledge that it differs from Marx's own theory. It is worth recalling that neither Marx nor Ricardo argue that cross-sectional variations are negligible. Indeed, they both emphasize that at any moment in time, prices of production may significantly differ from values. So that's something that's important to say. That if you're a proponent of this labor theory of price, you're not a proponent of Marx's economics as Marx put it forward. Whether that can be a good or bad thing, whatever, but you're not saying that this is what Marx said.
Right. And Marx maybe wasn't all that interested in this question about price determination, but he did have something to say about it, and it wasn't this.
Yeah, well, I think Marx was extremely interested in it because remember, like, yeah, because like I think Marx himself said that, you know, they can't, if classical economics can't get over the transformation of prices problem, it's a dead art.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure he said that somewhere.
In that respect, that's true, but I think the autonomist read of value theory is broadly correct in that what Marx really wanted out of this was to demonstrate to people where profit really comes from and to get the political effects of this. But he did care if it was true. It's just like, and you know, he actually does solve the scientific question. I guess my point is his motivations for solving the scientific question. A lot of the people that stress how much of a critique this is, I think they're right, that that's what was underlyingly driving Marx. But I think if that to people conflicts with making a genuine scientific contribution, that they don't really understand what drives scientists.
Yeah, because Marx was also interested in like calculus and all this other crazy shit too.
Yeah.
So it's not like he didn't have scientific interests, even if he had political interests.
He had some weird math interests that didn't work out well, actually. I mean, that his alternative calculuses are fun. Let's move on.
Okay, and here we have a passage that Emmanuel was referring to earlier.
Right.
Do you want to read this paragraph, Emmanuel?
Yeah. So the labor theory of price, of course, will hold that if you have more labor in one industry and less labor in another, then the industry with more labor will have more value and therefore higher prices. But Marx disagrees. And so here is the quote that Kleiman is using. He says, a rather well-known passage in Volume 1 of Capital says the opposite. Everyone knows that a cotton spinner who, if we considered the percentage over the whole of his applied capital, employs much constant capital and little variable capital, does not, on account of this, pocket less profit or surplus value than a baker, who sets in motion relatively much variable capital and little constant capital. So the baker and the cotton spinner might earn exactly as much or pocket as much profit, even though one clearly does more labor than the other with the same amount of capital advanced. And so this is one of the things where the labor theory of price and the labor theory of value are two very distinct theories.
Okay, this next little bit is pretty good, I think. Thus, evidence that supports the labor theory of price does not serve to confirm Marx's value theory. Conversely, evidence that disconfirms the labor theory of price, such as the evidence I'll represent below, does not serve to disconfirm Marx's theory. His defense of the law of value rests on the three aggregate price-value equalities, as we have seen, and he explicitly denied that price-value differences in individual industries have any bearing on the law's validity. So this is important. So if the labor theory of price, so what Shake and these boys or Cockshot and these boys are saying, if that's true, that doesn't confirm Marx. And if it's wrong, it doesn't disconfirm Marx. They're just two different theories altogether.
And I think some of the some of the refutations of the previous critiques by Baum-Bawerk and that kind of thing, and that were focused on, you know, the prices of individual things, or like the prices of, you know, just the macro level of doing price prediction on the macro level in the way that, you know, a lot of bourgeois economics is interested in. I suppose that's kind of more what I'm getting at, that, you know, yes, Marxist theory has implications for this sort of thing, but yeah, this is not his research question.
Okay, so we're going to move on to 11.4 here, the spurious correlation problem. So this is going to get into the idea of, you know, is that 97% that you're getting? Is that because you're actually including something that you shouldn't be in your model? Okay, this is what happened to me when I was doing my what was it, a predictive tree, or I can't remember what the hell it was, in bank. So I basically had wrong evidence. I correlated evidence in my list of variables, and it caused the whole thing to be a tautology. Okay. Freeman called attention in 1998 to a fact not being sufficiently appreciated. Strong price-value correlations may not be valid evidence, owing to a problem known as spurious correlation. If a correlation between two variables disappears or is lowered substantially once we control for the influence of a hidden third variable, that is, introduce it as a control variable, then the correlation is spurious. The word spurious is somewhat misleading, since the correlation is a statistical fact, but the point is that it cannot be validly used as evidence of a genuine relationship between the first two variables. Okay, so he goes on to talk here about, say, something like, there's a well-known example in statistics, if you're learning statistics, to show somebody is what a spurious correlation is. One of them here is between firefighters, number of firefighters, and the dollar amount of damage that's done at a fire. So let's read this one. The strong correlation between the number of firefighters at the scene of a fire and the dollar amount of damage that is done is a well-known example of spurious correlation. The more firefighters at the scene, the larger the amount of damage. Yet it is invalid to conclude that the firefighters are causing the damage. What's actually going on, of course, is that a third variable, the size of the fire, is a source of the relationship between the firefighters and the damage. Larger fires cause more firefighters to come to the scene than small fires do, and larger fires cause more damage than small ones. If we control for the difference in the size of the fire, little, if any, correlation between the number of firefighters and the amount of dollar damage remains. So the original correlation is spurious. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the nub of this. That's the nub of the entire chapter right there.
Yeah.
Is the size a problem?
Yep. And just a primer of what the world can't fucking talk today. Speak Jesus words. All right. What the word control means is pretty much that you remove that from the data. So like if we remove the sizes of the fires, is there still a relationship between F and D?
We remove if we remove the effect of the size.
Yeah.
So we will be, we actually are including the size to remove the effect of the size.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
okay. Yeah. Is that, have I cleared that up or made it worse? I don't know.
No, I
that
think
was a lot clearer.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, because the problem when you're doing something like, say, between the fire and the damage there, you wouldn't have the size of the fire as a variable. So in your analysis, your regression or whatever, they'll be highly linked. But when you include the size and it's able to basically, you can say, oh, this, now we have this variable, you'll be able to see what all the effect is from. And then you can take that out and control for it and see if there's anything left over. Okay.
Right. And if you controlled for that variable, you would likely see the opposite relationship, that the more firefighters you get on a fire, the less damage. Likely.
Unless they're being sloppy and they're like throwing shit all over the garden and pulling down pipes and pulling down your fence, and all that kind of stuff.
Or unless they plugged it into the oil hydrant instead of the water
Yeah.
hydrant. It's always
It's
possible,
fucking-
I suppose.
Yeah. Total hydrant. I like that concept. Okay.
Why is this so close and so similar to the water hydrant? This is cruel.
Yeah. I thought the O meant, oh, this is water. Now. Okay. So in precisely the same way, size may be a third variable that causes difference. That causes industry level values W and prices P to move together. If we control for the differences in size and little no correlation remains between values and prices, then the original correlation was spurious. Cockshott and Cottrell have argued that this is a false concern because values and price are themselves measures of industry size. When we say that an industry is large or small, we may well mean that the value and the price are large or small. Size is not some distinct third variable that causes them to vary together. Okay, that's a reasonable argument. I think that's a decent argument to make. But we'll see when we get further on that doesn't actually hold water. Okay. One problem with this argument is that empirical studies of the value-price relationship have necessarily used very aggregated government data. Okay, so let's have a look at this graph. I think this graph is very important. Okay, so this gets to the nub of what's going on in the data, I think. If we have a look at like the graph there, you see these tables here from 1 to 9, okay? Let's imagine that they're prices, okay? And the ones on the left, this obviously hasn't photocopied very well as PDF, but the ones on the left are supposed to be dark, and the ones on the right are supposed to be white. But one is going to be the price and one's going to be the value. Okay, well, let's just say the one on the left is the price. And you'll see there that the correlation there is there's no correlation. So basically, there's a whole load of basically prices going on and there's labor. So if these are 9 different industries or different firms or whatever, there's not really a correlation between any of them, between their prices and their amount of labor that's going into them. Okay, but when we clump these together, let's go and have a look. We leave industry 1 on its own, we clump 2 and 4 together, and we clump 5 and 9 together. Okay, and just this idea of summing these kind of random variables from a distribution, they're going to get very close to each other. Okay, that's just a fact of statistics. Yeah, these are going to get close to each other. So we see on the right-hand graph that's taken from the left-hand graph where there's no correlation, but when we aggregate, there's a massive correlation. You can see the prices and the values in all of those are really quite close. Okay, and Andrew's going to make the point is that like this is very likely where all the correlation is coming from. It's you're aggregating things that actually aren't correlated, and when you aggregate them up, it's causing this correlation to appear. Anybody have any problem with that graph?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. I think that's I like that graph. I think that explains an awful lot intuitively what's going on. Like you on the left, you've got no correlation. On the right, you've got correlation. And it's just a matter of how you clump the data together and summed it up. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, this example does not prove the price value correlations obtained from the data are spurious. It could be the case that pre as well as post aggregate correlations are strong. The example does demonstrate, however, that the reported price value correlations may be partly or even entirely mere byproducts of the aggregation process. Lacking access to disaggregated data, we cannot know whether this is the case or not. It is therefore necessary to eliminate any possibility of spurious correlation arising from aggregation, and for this reason, if for no other, to control for differences in industry size. Okay. Who wants to take this tautological problem? Because I like this argument. This is an excellent argument here as well. So we have kind of two problems that he's going to attack to try and get at these. We've got this idea of aggregating causing a problem, and then we also have this idea of like a third variable. Okay. Lexi, do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, let's make it happen. So what, should I just read this or? All right. Because I could either.
Do you want to talk about it first, maybe? Or do you want me to...
Yeah. Let's All right. See if I remember this. Yeah. Okay. So this is why Kleinman thinks that industry size needs to be a control variable. Well, for another reason, is that values and prices have a significant component in common, namely costs, the cost price.
Okay.
This is the analogous case here, is labor costs are the sum of after-tax earnings plus the taxes that are deducted. And so that's represented as LC, triple equals, I forget how you say that. LC, like if or only if, yeah, right. Defined as, thank you. So right, labor costs defined as after-tax earnings and taxes, and then workers' incomes are their after-tax earnings plus any non-labor income. So the correlation is very strong. However, and when L is R, excuse me, when labor costs are big, then incomes are big, and small when they're small. But it's obvious that labor costs and incomes are not two separate variables, and they're pretty much the same thing. The third variable that causes labor costs and incomes to move together is after-tax income.
Yeah.
Or after-tax earnings. After-tax earnings. Excuse
me. So it's basically making the point that, like, you know, your income as a worker is very linked to the labor costs of your boss, right?
Right.
And, you know, the after-tax earnings that they pay you, you get. That's the core component. Yeah. So labor costs are linked to wages, you know, or income by workers' income, you know. And if you were going to try and do a correlation between them, they're going to be massive because they've got a very, they've got a massive component. Yeah. So similar component. So similarly, when we do the analogous thing for prices, so we have these two beauties here. We got values is defined as cost plus surplus, and we got profits are defined as costs plus average profit. Okay, plus profit. Okay, so one is cost plus surplus, and the other is cost plus profit. Okay, so we see here that it's the costs in both of them are similar. So we got to control them, other. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty easy when you see the equations right next to each other, and in both of the left sides of the, or excuse me, in both of the right sides of the equation, there's the same variable. That's exactly how it doesn't always appear in the statistical arguments, but that's exactly what's going on. It's a tautological correlation. That's what he calls it anyway, and I see why, because it's not a mystery that something closely tacks on with itself.
Yeah. So A equals A equals B, you know.
Right.
It's funny because it's like such a basic logical mistake, and yet I can totally see how you can make it if you're not really paying attention to what the variables you're defining actually are in the world. So,
I think if you were, sorry, keep going, Derek.
No, I mean, like, because basically all you're saying is labor cost and wage are price and value correlate because price is value and labor cost is wage. I mean, yes, there are some differences because they're not exactly the same, but they're the overriding definitional component is there, and so I mean, it's just funny to me because it's funny to me because it's a basic fucking like logic class 101 mistake.
This kind of hurts. I mean, I took a high school stats class, you know, then I learned this and I remembered this, you know, and I don't know. I don't know, man.
Like,
I learned this from a class, but I also learned it from a literal analytic logic class. Like,
right. No, that's true.
The same problem. And I'm actually kind of articulating it because it's so basic.
Yeah, I think if you showed this chapter to a working statistician, they'll kind of laugh. You know, they'll say, obviously, Andrew's here. Okay. I just think, let's keep going anyway. 11.6, how you measure the size matters. Okay. So he's going to make a kind of a particular point here about the size of things, that you have to get the right measure. Okay. So let's see what he says here. Imagine there is a strong correlation between the number of cars and the number of dogs in various cities, but only because the cities are of different sizes. There are a large number of cars and dogs in large cities and small number of cars and dogs in small cities. The correlation is, of course, spurious. Yet, if we control for the influence of size by using the city's areas as our measure, we may still find a strong correlation. Although area is certainly a measure of city size, it's probably a poor one in this context. Population is clearly the best measure to use. This example shows three important things. First, the size, the particular measure of size we choose matters. We must try and find the best one. Excuse me. Second, the best measure of size is the one that eliminates the most spurious correlation. Finally, although the correlation between two variables may not decrease substantially when inferior control variables are used, this does not make the correlation a genuine one, and it should not prevent us from concluding that the correlation is spurious. If the introduction of any third variable substantially reduces the correlation between the first two, then the original correlation was spurious. Okay, this is just like to be, if we're going to get nitpicky here, I would say that it's always possible to do some fuckery and create a variable which that you can always create a variable and come up with one that could pretend and that could make you think that there was spurious correlation, but not in the real world. He's making a real world argument there. Does anybody have any problems with what I'm saying there?
No, I mean, you can't hear me shaking my head. I'm just shaking my head. You know what I mean? Like the debate is so bored. I would actually like to do as you said, Tom, and to strip out some of the identifying features of this paper and just sort of do a study and show them to random, people that are working in stats or whatever, just in the industry, and just you see how they. How blank author says this about blank, and just see how the arguments stack up and see. I'd like to see how that would actually play out.
Yeah, we all have a play out. It wouldn't be good. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's one final thing here before we get into the data and the computations. The above discussion of tautological correlation indicates that industry cost K is the best measure of size to use in order to eliminate any possible spurious correlation between prices and values. By using it, we eliminate not only the problems caused by aggregation, but tautological correlation as well. Okay, so that's interesting, yeah. Yet even if my analysis of the tautological correlation problem is not accepted, we have seen that cost may still be the best measure of size to use. That will be the case if we eliminate more of whatever spurious correlation may be present when we use cost than when we use other measures of industry size. Okay, there's one bit there, there's one sentence in this. Okay, I want to say, sorry. By using it, we eliminate not only the problems caused by aggregation, but tautological correlation as well. Now, I understand tautological correlation, but I'm not so sure about aggregation. Why does using cost get rid of the aggregation problem? Anybody?
I don't know.
Emmanuel?
Sorry, I'm having a technical argument in the chat.
Yeah. So all right, let's come back here.
So it's about the tautological correlation, where
Sorry.
two things being.
Well, Well,
why is that?
Why does cost? Okay, sure. So it's obvious of why there's the above discussion indicates that industry cost is the best measure of size to use in order to eliminate possible spurious correlation between prices and values. But Andrew claims that it's not just the tautological correlation, but also the problems of aggregation.
Right.
So can we just extrapolate why that's true?
Right. So the problem caused by aggregation is that if we add up all of the values, they should correspond to all prices, right? Total price equals total value, but that really doesn't tell us that much, because the implication of the labor theory of price that he is talking about here is going to say that in individual industries that use more or less labor, their prices should be higher or lower, respectively. And we can't see that by just adding everything up in aggregate. So by controlling for costs, the problems. Shit, I had this thought out, but I do not brain well today. So,
no. I feel you, because it seems like those aggregation problems kind of like, I don't know, at base end up also being a problem of tautology. So that's why I'm choking on that.
Yeah,
let's come back to it.
Well, it's not really a tautology though per se, but
no.
Yeah, we'll
labor cost and wages are not exactly. For example, like that's tautological, but they're like, if you look at that aggregation problem, it's not just because they're not exactly the same thing.
Okay, I think I understand.
Let's come back to it. I sent Andrew an email on that one during the week and I forgot, so I just thought I'd throw it out there. But let's keep going anyway to the computations. Okay, so Andrew is going to say he came here and he took 20 years of data to estimate prices and values. Okay, and he followed the same procedures as Ochoa's one, who was one of the guys who, or I think is a guy who did it with Anwar Sheikh. Okay, so he did it, though the only difference I think really is that he did it with the TSSI definitions as opposed to simultaneous price value estimates. Okay, so let's have a look. When Andrew did it, he actually got better results. So 97% wasn't good enough to Andrew. He's very competitive. Let's have a look here and what happens. This is without controlling for industry size. The correlation coefficients were larger than any previously reported. The average of 21 years price value correlations was 0.991. So 0.99. And they range from about 0.98 to 0.99. Okay. Similarly, the various measures of the average price value deviation were smaller than any previously reported for the US economy and amongst the smallest reported for any country. Okay. Okay. So it's going to get into some technical stuff, but the mean absolute deviation, for example, range from between 7.9 to 9.5%, and its average value was 8.6%. So if you knew how much labor was in there, you were going to get the amount, they're going to get the price within about 8.6% of the time. Yeah. So your price will give you about 8.6%. Also ran the standard log linear regression of the industry aggregate prices and the aggregate values. The results were remarkably close to those predicted by the labor theory of price. For instance, each 1% difference in the industry's aggregate values led to a 0.9996% difference between their aggregate prices, which is almost identical to the theory's prediction. The value of the R squared, the correlation coefficient, was 0.99, which means that variations in values accounted for 99% of the variations in prices. Okay, so that is like, that's incredibly accurate model if it's true. So let's see, will we see what happens here when he controls for the industry size. Okay, now he did two models here. Does anybody want to discuss what the difference between the two models are and why he might have done them? Emmanuel, are you still arguing away?
Yeah, I'm still arguing. But
Focus.
yeah, I try to understand the two models as well. But I don't know if I could give a good account right now. Too many thoughts going on in my head at the same time.
Okay. Well, I think the reason why he did the two models differently was to basically show this R-squared difference. Okay. So let's read it here. I'm very tired, so I'll see if I can remember how I worked it out. Okay. So so I use this is Andrew going here now to describe how he built his models around 11.9. Okay, controlling for the influence of industry size. I used cost as a control variable in two different ways. First, whereas prior tests of the labor theory of price looked at the relationship between industries' aggregate prices values, what I should call Model 1 looked at the relationship between prices and values per dollar of cost. I demonstrated that this procedure was legitimate, since if the labor theory of price were true, the price-value relationship would be exactly the same in the two cases. Okay, Andrew is making a claim here that is linked from one of his papers that we read. I think it's a 2005 paper, or it's in both of those papers. I read it yesterday, and it's simply a deductive statistical proof. So it's by definition, what Andrew is setting up here, his model 1 is going to be slightly different, but by definition, it has to be true if the labor theory of price is true. He hasn't included the argumentation in here, but he has in those other papers, and it's very basic. It's extremely basic. You know, it's about a 3-line proof, and it's a deductive mathematical statistical proof. So it's not like there's any weirdness going on there. Model 2, however, introduced cost as a control variable in a more typical manner by including it as a distinct variable in the regression equation. Okay, in this case, I looked at the relationship between the industry's aggregate price and values, but instead of treating aggregate value as a single variable, as prior studies had done, I decomposed it into cost and value per dollar of cost. Okay, so one of them is the relationship between prices and values per dollar of cost, and the other one then is just a simple control, simple regression equation that has the cost, the price broke down into cost. Okay. Sorry, let me be into cost and value per dollar of cost. Okay. Okay. Oh, Lord. So what we should be trying to predict here is that basically it's going to be 99% accurate. Okay. When we control for size, we should still be seeing a 99% accurate prediction. Okay. That's our 99% R-squared correlation coefficient. Okay. So let's have a look at this table. And let's have a look. Okay. So this table is a bit of a goddamn slam dunk. Anybody want to talk that section through? Maybe I'll do it. So I kind of want to read and see the table up there for people at the same time. Okay, let me read from my book here. Okay. Regression results 11.10. Okay. So let's have a look at the WK coefficient, the log WK coefficient. So we can see here that it's tiny. Okay. So it should be predicted that that will be 1. Okay. And you can see that it's closer to 0 than 1. Okay. these figures differ so greatly from the value of one predicted by the labor theory of price that we can reject the prediction with a very high degree of confidence, at least 97%, 7.5% using a one-tailed t-test. Moreover, the impact of cost-controlled values on cost-controlled prices was never statistically significant at any tolerable level. Okay, so when you take the costs out and we're just looking at the extra bit of value that's coming from the labor in this particular product to the extra bit of price that's been added above the cost, we're finding that the labor that's gone into this product, the added new little bit of labor, not the labor that's included in not all the stuff that's in the cost, but just a bit that has been added in this production of this new commodity, does not explain in any real large sense the amount of added price that's gone into that product.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So, for example, I have a pair of shoes. They've cost me 10 quid for the leather and all that rubbish. I do, say, for example, 5 hours of labor. Okay. The price of the shoe when I sell it is £20. My labor amount is not very correlated to the increase in the price over the cost of the leather. Okay, my 5 hours is not linked to the extra £10 of the price in any good sense. You know, somebody else is making jumpers and their labor of knitting the wool, maybe that's only adding a tiny bit to the price, and mine is adding a lot. Okay, that's what this table is saying here. Does that make sense? To everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is also kind of what we would expect from simultaneous models as well, because in their models, everything boils down to wages and technology anyway. So once you remove wages from the equation, we should expect these models to not predict anything on the basis of actually, added labor adding value. It's the cost price that's doing all the work.
So it should be the price of labor and not the value of the labor. That would be the prediction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Let's go on to. Okay. Let's see what's next here. He says, division of values and prices by cost necessarily lower the price. Okay. So model 1 is which one? Model 1 is the... Okay, yeah, okay. So here he's going to get into why he did the first model. So division of values and prices by cost. So the first one that we've done here, this is the one where he's basically divided by the cost. Okay. So division of values and price by cost necessarily lowers the price value correlation. Okay, because you're taking a massive chunk of price out of the cost price out. But the correlation coefficient would remain positive and statistically significant if the LTP were correct. The labor theory of price was correct. This is what we talked about earlier, where Andrew deduced a logical mathematical deduction of that this should be equivalent. However, whenever the log WK coefficient is negative or statistically insignificant, so is the correlation coefficient. Okay, what's he saying here? Okay, so he says here, so he's going to talk about here, all R squared figures were therefore
What's the issue?
Sorry, I'm just reading this paragraph here.
Yeah, with the R squared for Model 1.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he's saying, so this is what I worked this out the other day and I'm after getting it now again. So this is the difference between the R squared and this model that he built.
Yes.
It's saying that it doesn't explain any of the variation in prices.
Yeah. Exactly.
But in the second one, it's explaining the variation in prices.
Yeah, exactly. The 99% of the variation in so 99% of the variation in the aggregate prices each year is explained by the costs.
Okay, sorry. Yeah,
so
that's
that's Model 2, and Model 1 is labor, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let me just say, so there's going to be a bit of editing here. Let me just say it kind of clearly. So we see in model
values account for the variations of values account for 0% of the variation in prices once you control for cost the way it does in Model 1.
Right. Yeah.
Model 2 variations in costs explain 99% of the variations in prices. So it's just it's pretty much the inverse of.
Yeah. So what he's the reason why pretty slam dunk, and the reason why he made the two models was, one was going to get rid of the cost out of it, and it should still have held. And what we see is that it explains nothing. And in the second one, he leaves the cost in there, and you can see it explains everything. But the thing is, it's only explaining it because cost is in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if the added little bit of labor that somebody did to their product, to their raw materials, was the predictor for the added bit of price would be added, the cost. So the added bit of price to the raw materials. So you do some labor, and now your leather that was cost £10, when you sell it, it's £12. If that £2 extra was linked to the amount of labor that the cobbler did, your R squared would still be 99 in Model 1. Okay? And what it's saying is it's 0. So it's basically saying that the relationship between that extra bit of work that somebody does is noise. Yeah? It's probably random distribution, and some kind of random distribution, but which is bound by our aggregate qualities. If you want to talk about Marx, what Marx would have, like, if we're talking about how it works in reality, it's bounded in some kind of statistical mechanical sense, which we don't want to get into, but it's bounded by the aggregate equalities. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's also I really like the last few sentences where it talks about Model 2's explanatory power.
Okay.
And how if we just removed value from the equation completely, we would actually get a better fit. So if we just modeled it on cost alone, we would get an even better R squared. But because we're including values here, that's actually distorting it. So it's actually removing predictive power rather than adding to it.
Yeah, so that's pretty freaking damning.
Yeah.
Okay, so thus, final one. Thus, contrary to the claim that industry's values are the dominant determinant of their prices, it's actually industry's costs alone that are dominant determinants. Once cost is used as a control variable, there is no reliable evidence that industry's values have any influences on the prices whatsoever. The strong correlations between prices and values are spurious, and the evidence compels us to reject the labor theory of price. And it's a slam dunk, this chapter. You know, that table 11.1, look at it. You got one model where you get rid of costs and there's no correlation, 0. And you got one where there is cost and you got 99% correlation. It's literally like you're including.
You're not getting a 99% correlation. You're getting an R squared of 99%, which is a measure of effect. Not because if it were a 99% correlation, then that would mean that each dollar of costs equals exactly $1 of price. So that's just your R. Your R squared is a measure of how much of the variance is explained by.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, misspoke. But the gist is still similar. We're seeing that the variance, like basically the first model is showing, look, the labor theory of price is rubbish, and then the second one is showing you, look at the effect of including cost has on the explanation for the variance. Okay, so what's next? This is our last bit.
Yeah, basically, the more workers you hire, the more expensive your product is going to be. Who knew, right? I had no idea.
Right, Emmanuel, explain this graph to us then here. I'm sick of doing all the talking. What's he talking about here?
Right, so this is about whether or not it means anything if prices and values are close to each other, right? So as we saw in the example of the cotton spinner, prices and values do not have to be close at all to each other in any industry, especially not in every specific firm. So whether or not they're close to each other isn't actually really all that important, and you can see that here on figure 11.2, that on the graph on the left, prices and values, they increase together and they have a sort of one-to-one relationship. However, if you look at and thus, a really strong correlation. But if you look at the right hand graph, there is no correlation at all between prices and values. It's just complete noise. But they are close together. Each point is very close to the other data point. But there is absolutely no correlation between them. So just because we've proved that prices and values are close to each other, that doesn't really tell us much, because that does not mean that they are correlated in any sense. So that's pretty much his point.
Okay, I think that this is that it's very interesting that the statistical evidence here basically backs up the idea that prices and values transform. What do people say about that?
Well, at the very least, it seems to demolish hopes for just doing an empirical, like, reach around, pardon the expression, for this logical problem. And the thing that bothers me is, what if Kleiman is right about all these attempts to rescue Marx and correct Marx being bullshit and hopeless, but he doesn't see some, like, basic problem? You know what I mean? Because
what do you mean?
Well, stuff like fundamental Marxian theorem, and the empirical defense of a labor theory of value, and maybe even simultaneous valuation in general. These are all attempts to get over some basic problem, and maybe Kleiman's 100% right, and that problem isn't a real problem. But I have a nagging suspicion that, there's got to be something there. And the thing I'm worried about is that Kleiman is right about everything he talked about, and then there's one thing he didn't talk about or something. Do you know what I mean? Because this seems pretty bulletproof. I don't know how you get around this. I'm willing to hear counter arguments, but there seems to be such elementary errors going on. It's disheartening.
Well, look, I think that somebody could make that argument about price and value and be in good faith and want to show it. But the problem is when you get the counter evidence in, you just have to get rid of your theory because it doesn't work.
Well, but you know how it works with theories, though. Like there's some level of commitment that people have to theories as they reconstruct them. That's why I ever decided to try to see if the labor theory of value could work, even though I kept reading that it can't. You know what I mean? Like it's not like Popper where there's the falsification event and well, now it's just false. You have this sense, and I don't think it's also, I don't want it to be, at least like Thomas Kuhn, where you just have these different paradigms and they sociologically wrestle. I like Lakatosha's kind of middle ground. I like the idea that, you have research programs and that you have these like events that challenge the research program, but as long as you can form coherent responses to them, your commitment isn't just ideological or it isn't just religious. You have to have the commitment in order to try to rise to the occasion of each of these potential falsification events. So, I don't fault anyone for, having those commitments, but so many of the attempts to get around these things falls apart, and the ones that seem decent and that make sense, I don't know, you just get all kinds of shit, a laundry list of things thrown at you if you try to bring it out there. And I guess what it comes down to is that I just have to increase my mathematical and logistical like confidence in order to, proceed with that stuff, in order to become more than just a like kind of, skeptical, but kind of interested Lakatoshian pluralist, reaching towards a research program, but not knowing I can't really confirm it myself. Here, I mean, my statistics are not that sharp, but the logic seems pretty airtight. So I understand someone that would be trying to, I don't know, put some kind of patchwork onto this, put some sticky tape onto this, do an ad hoc kind of defense of this. But I just don't see how they could get around the basic logical problem. Or not the basic logical problem, the basic statistical problem, right?
Well, Cockshot and Cottrell did do a response to this, and they basically came up with some simulated data which they said disproved it. But when Andrew took their mathematics of how they created their simulated data, he proved mathematically that their data was negatively correlated already it was already negatively correlated. And, it's a mathematical proof. So, I think that you can't look at this stuff and read the papers that are on it. Like, it's very difficult to maintain that as a theory. I can't see, I don't know of any other responses that hold any water. So, to me, that's a slam dunk. But, at this stage, we've gone through, I feel like, so many different arguments with Andrew. And we've gone through so many different people that he's battled with. And every time we've looked into the primary sources and everything, he's always been fair to what they've said. And he's always won and disproved them. And that the comebacks have always, to me, seemed to be of much, well, haven't held water. I don't know what other people think.
I don't buy that.
On the mathematics in this book.
Other than, so there are some mathematical examples I don't check out.
My opinion on air. But,
okay.
Okay,
well, let's do it off air. But no, the bits where the math was wrong, he said it, and they were so tangential to them. They were very, very, very tangential.
The book here, as far as I can tell, everything is presented fairly. There are a couple of this equals that, even though a said person says this doesn't equal that, where I actually think we have to do more than we have done. To conclusively prove that. I would think that's definitely true with Mosley. But his argument on Mosley specifics was sound. But
maybe this is a discussion for when we do our wrap up, I think.
Yeah, I guess the point is that, like, if we could just scale it back to the empirical defense of the law of value, because I would need some time to really sit down and chew on exactly, how could I possibly maintain nagging skepticism in the face of any of this? Because, especially in this chapter, Kleinman is clearly engaging the norms of bourgeois social science. And here, I'm saying bourgeois social science is kind of a virtue. They can do math, and is just like, if he's presented the arguments fairly, this must follow. Period. And this is very basic. That's the troubling thing about it, is that it's so basic. How could such a basic thing slide? And I get it, why, someone at the nuclear power plant would want to obscure, all the children are being fed in the area, and doing some statistical bullshit to keep that in order. I mean, I get that. That makes more sense. For some reason, the the kickbacks of doing this kind of bullshit in Marxist academia or Marxist, extra academic intellectual circles, it just seems so marginal. How could it possibly? I don't know. How could it possibly remunerate one for the elementary errors here? Like, I don't get it. It can't be this simple, I say to myself. But I'm looking at this, what could you say to this?
Let's read the last paragraph here. Okay, before we wrap up. We'll wrap up early tonight. The fact that price value deviations are small is therefore not valid evidence for the LTP that the LTP is correct. All of that evidence suggests strongly that it is not correct. It is there not tenable to appeal to the data in order to sidestep either the allegations that Marx's value theory is internally inconsistent or the failure of mainstream Marxian economics to make the theory make sense. The interpretive and theoretical issues need to be confronted squarely and resolved. I think that's a strong end to that chapter.
Right. I mean, if this was a proper reconstruction of Marxist theory and it gave non-scrupulous, non-tautological, high correlations, then there would be a point here that, okay, the exact logic of the theory, the exact logical consistency of the theory is, demonstrates that we don't have the mechanism down, but at least it's basically like the scientific status is confirmed by other means. We don't have to engage with that in order to figure out whether it's a worthwhile enterprise at all. That's not true. We have to do the value theory to see if it's a valid scientific enterprise, because there's no overwhelming statistical evidence that would change that epistemological landscape.
I think one of the few ones that would back it up would be the rise in organic composition and the fall in the rate of profit.
But they can't even agree. They can't even agree how to fucking calculate that, which is
pathetic. I was about to say, I've never heard anybody agree on what the calculation parameters are. I'm being very serious in that.
Yeah, because there are different ways of how you can calculate it. But to say, you're trying to estimate a thing, you're not getting exact figures. You're trying to estimate it.
Yeah, but that leaves a basic research hole, though. If you're like, we're not getting exact figures, we're working off estimates, and we also don't agree on what the parameters of the estimates could be, then like, and like I believe in the falling rate of value, but I can't get two people who believe in it to articulate it in the same way. Even people who are aligned, like Roberts and Kleiman, don't seem to actually do the same things with it. And I'll give you an example of that. Kleiman doesn't seem to buy Roberts' argument on Condrav waves. So
well, I mean, neither do I.
Yeah, but like, but like, he shows no evidence for contrary waves. That's just an empirical thing. But like, when Andrew, say for example, when Kleiman and Roberts and Freeman have slightly different measures for how you calculate the falling rate of profit, it's not that they all disagree with each other. Just some of them think that this one is actually this one they think is closer to the truth. It's not like Roberts is saying, Kleiman, you're fucking wrong. That's totally wrong way of doing it. He's just saying, like, I think this one accurately reflects it a bit more. And they'll have a disagreement over whether this data, and, you know, whether you include circulating capital or whether you include money capital, you know, but they're all agreeing in principle on how you go about it. You know what I mean? Whereas if you get someone like Mosley, he'll say you should use current costs. Okay. And that's an entirely different theoretical thing that they will disagree with. Okay, so there's a difference there. But
have you read a lot of economics outside of the Marxist economics, specifically outside of the stuff mentioned in this book? And I keep on bringing it up because I kind of think, is part of the issue the selection of what we're fighting against? Because there's all kinds of economists who in the Marxian spectrum, historically speaking, who either must agree with this but never came to the terminological conclusions that Kleiman did, or don't agree with it at all but aren't dealt with in this book because it wasn't within the scope of what was being argued, which isn't a fault of the book, but it does actually mean that we don't know. Like, the slam dunkiness of this seems questionable to me. And I keep on bringing up Mandel, and I'm gonna bring up again, like, because there are tangential things about melt, and I'm actually, when I've seen this stuff argued where there's the greatest disagreement, it is over melt issues, not over TSSI.
Right. So that's something that the TSSI and the new interpretation are also vulnerable to.
Right.
But look, I don't know, Derek. I've read MMT, I've read some neoclassical, I've read some Austrian, I've read some behavioral. I've read a good bit.
Other Marxist.
Oh, other Marxists. Sorry, I thought you were saying other economics.
Yeah, to be fair, I also thought you meant other, like, economics.
No, I said, have you read the other Marxist economics not mentioned in this book?
I've read a bit of Harvey. I've read, I've been reading Capital, I haven't read, but like, I don't understand. Like, what's your point? Who are we talking about? We have to read.
Well, yeah, the point is to read the alternative, like, secondary literature on Marx. Like, to read the primary source, good. You're trying to get a true handle on it. Great. Derek just means, like, within this little subsection of the debates on the literature, to get another point of view from the debates on the literature, from Scheich, from Mosley, so from the people that come up and don't look like complete buffoons. Like,
no, I'm not even saying that. Actually, what I'm saying.
Okay, what the fuck are you saying, Derek?
I have no idea what he's saying.
You're saying that.
Turn and face the microphone.
I'm looking at books because I can bring up books that are not that are Marxist economics.
Just make your point. Come on.
One, I think you have a false sense of security in this, because the fact that I can only find people who absolutely agree with Kleiman on everything to back up your points indicates to me there's an issue. Two, I still have been bringing this whole thing about the Marxist economic tradition that isn't mentioned in this, but from before the Schaffer debates are tangential to it, that also don't conceptualize this stuff in the same way, even if they agree with Kleiman, or don't agree with Kleiman. All right.
So that would be like the people in actual, like, Leninism and, like, the actual traditions that were doing value theory, either in, like, in a Soviet state or in, like, the Fourth International. Do I have you right?
Right. So when you were looking at that work, and I've been bringing it up, does it match or does it not match? that's actually a much more interesting test than did Kleiman win the debate he set out.
Okay.
He selected the debating terms. Like, so fucking what? He picked his opponents.
Well, I don't know, Derek. That's a bit. Look, this is getting into like our roundup. So let's kind of go offline, because let's do a proper roundup where we can discuss what we want to discuss properly. But I feel like we're just talking, just kind of rambling here. I don't want to edit it.
Well, I understand, but we'll have a fuller version of this conversation next time, because or maybe off air so we can or maybe off air so that we can actually clarify what we want to talk about in our roundup episode. So structured. Yeah. Sure. Because I want to look for these discussions. I just kind of want to do them when we're prepared and we can have our arguments ready for each other. Totally. That's understandable. I mean, I have read some of the stuff that Derek's talking about, and I don't have much more of a sense of this. So, yeah, I would love to do this. Love to do that. So,
yeah, one thing you might. Okay, let's do it. Bring it up here. Let's say goodbye to the chat. Let's see who's in the chat.
Let's see the chat.
I don't want to be like putting you off, Derek. I just want to make sure we're.
Derek's gonna have a lot of a chance to sound off about this next week, and so we'll have
to organize a week where Derek's not here. I think.
Oh, fuck off! Come on.
I'm joking. Oh dear. You should know me by now, Lexi.
Yeah. Well, look. Thanks to Emmanuel and Antagonist in the chat, because I think that's it. No, I'm kidding. There's definitely more people here. There's 15 people watching, and not discounting anybody. But let's kick it from the top, huh?
Hit that like button. We've only got 2 likes, and I'm one of them. So come on, people, hit that like button. Unless this is a really bad episode.
We got 2. We got 2. Yeah, if it's a bad episode, then just fine. But yeah, we got that like button. You know what to do.
There we go.
So we got 2. Thank you. If you believe in fairies,
we also have Matthew DX. Matthew DX. Alex McGuire, the new Patreon subscriber just today. Thank you, Alex. Alex Welsh, karate chopping people in the nuts in there all evening.
From the land down under.
We have, of course, stalwart Antagonist 1DZ giving it back to himself and Emmanuel.
That's right.
Anybody else in chat now? That's it, the whole way.
Data Lord Della Terra.
Data Lord
Data Lord.
Yeah. The loyal Data Lord. And we got Puya. Puya, good episode. Throwing down a good episode. Thank you, Puya. Would have been even better if you were on, but that's okay. It's
Puya didn't like this chapter.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can chat to him maybe in the roundup one about that as well. We also have Erica.
Oh yeah, we got Erica.
And Jake.
Hey.
And Jake P.
Yeah.
And Benjamin Hanshin.
Yeah, people are sounded off. Everybody likes the episode, and they definitely are raring to hear our spirited debate about this. So I have a feeling that our conclusion episode is going to be a barn burner.
Yeah, it might be a long one. It might be a 2-parter, I reckon, by the way people are talking. So that's good. Well, it's really good that we've read the book and that we have our own opinions on it, and now it's a time to chat about them and kind of have it out about what we think about it, because that's just as important as eventually getting to the final chapter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not just Kleiman's conclusions we're interested in.
Yeah. So with no further ado, I think we'll love you, and we will see you hopefully next week, depending on whether Emmanuel is in the land down under or not. Okay, everybody, we got a group. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.